Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session on climate smart solutions for resilient housing. I'm really for your participation today and also for our speakers for taking the time and willingness to share their perspectives and insights on this topic. I'm Jitendra Bolani. I'm the Global Director for Housing Finance Program for Habitat for Humanity. I'm based in the Philippines currently. Just a little context to this session. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, the building sector has a high improving sustainability compared with other sectors. We already see a lot of momentum in climate smart solutions that make housing resilient, particularly for vulnerable households. The housing sector is really unique in that it can be looked at from both climate mitigation as well as climate adaptation perspectives. I'm personally looking forward to learning insights from this session, as we have recently started working on the financial access for climate smart solutions, especially for resilient housing, and particularly housing finance space. So please allow me to introduce our panel today. Our first speaker will be Ms. Ronita Bardan. She is the Assistant Professor of Sustainability in Built Environment at the Department of Architecture, University of Cambridge. Our second speaker will be Mr. Peter Robb, who has more than 20 plus years of experience as communication and external affairs professional, mainly in the construction industry. And our third speaker will be Mr. Mark, who is the Senior Vice President, Sustainability and Innovation at Wienerberger AG. And our last speaker will be Mr. Andrew, who is program at a Net Zero Homes initiative at Whirlpool. So once again, welcome to all the panelists, and we will now proceed with 5 minutes presentation from each of our panelists on some of the good examples in climate resilient housing solutions, and also the existing lessons or design considerations that can be applied while developing or scaling such solutions. So I leave the floor open now, and probably may I request her to probably begin her presentation.
Thank you, Jiten, for introducing and putting me right in the front. Hi everybody, I am Dr. Ronita Bardan. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Architecture at the University of Cambridge, and I have been working on data-driven design for responding to climate, health, and energy burdens in population at risk. So try to share a very short presentation while I discuss the various caveats of innovation that can go in decarbonizing the affordable housing sector. And I'm very proud to say that we presented a part of this at COP26, and hopefully some of it has been taken up to modify it over the COP27 and also in the negotiations. Just let me know if you are unable to see my screen or if everything is working fine.
We can.
Perfect. Thank you, Jiten. So today I'll briefly discuss what is decarbonizing in the affordable housing sector, especially responding to the population at risk. And before going there, I briefly introduce what I've been working on for most of my time. And I respond to these 4 sustainable development goals. Who are very familiar with it, they will know by the color. I respond to energy, health, and sustainable communities, while also responding to gender mainstreaming. And I lead the research group called the Sustainable Design Group. This is a very, I would say, very important picture that always have stuck with me from, and I haven't yet narrowed it down to the source. It is taken from the internet, and that's why I call it anonymous. And we look at this sort of a city. This is a aerial view of Mumbai, where around 50 to 55% of population live in slum or slum-like settlements. It's around currently there are data which says there are around 65% of people who live in cramped, airless, slum-like situations and are making easy distress and transmission to disease. And this became more prominent during the COVID. But I think affordable housing solutions do not need such black swan events to be responded to. And that brings me up to this new policy that has been taken up by major governments in the global south, where they are trying to remove slum or de-slum cities by providing them affordable housing, which you can see in this picture. Their slums are being replaced with vertical housing. The best of this policy is this: for the first time, these people are having permanent shelter, so tenureship has been solved. But it does bring in a lot more of other consequences which are unintended, possibly. That's primarily because of the myopic nature of housing policies in general in the global south. And here I present to you a little brief movie of how informality can immediately be converted to formality. But what these sort of housing entails is a very different question, and probably discussion. And this is the reality picture. This is a picture which I took when I was in Mumbai in 2018. And it shows the condition of the affordable housing. These houses, first of all, they provide them not only tenureship and shelter, but also access to sanitation, private sanitation and toilet facilities, which is a massive win for the population living in slums or informally across the global south. For the first time, at least the women population do not have to restrict their food intake at night, and because they don't want to travel longer distance to visit a toilet. But it does come up with a lot more questions. What is the condition of the health burdens these houses are creating? Because it only caters to one very broad objective of housing maximum population. And when you come up with this sort of a problem, which itself is a solution in itself, and kind of initiating a lot more problems, then we need innovative solutions. And we try to look at first, the very first thing is what sort of gendered spaces these are they being provided. And we find that these houses in do not really cater to that sort of sector. But if you try to look at the energy consumption patterns, and which is a very common notion that these are poor people, and that's why they will not have any access to much money to purchase or do more energy consumption. But when you put people in a very dysfunctional house, they slowly tend to go towards a more energy intensive life. And this doesn't happen in a sudden manner, but it's very subtle, and it slowly slips into that sort of an energy burden. And we started looking at solutions, not only technological solutions of providing access to renewables or providing them more efficient appliances, but also trying to understand their behavior of uptake of these sort of appliances. Is it very natural, or how we can do it? There are pathways where we found that these houses come up with a lot of health burdens, which were probably not exposed to when they were living in the slums. And we find the pathways can be kind of decoupled from poverty. So you do not have to be having ill health. Why? Because just because you're poor. Yeah, and that's not really access. Not only the solution lies in access to healthcare, which is equitable quite there, but it is about understanding the very intricate details of what sort of pathways dysfunctional house can create in terms of health burdens. Definitely comfort and distress, which gets aggravated with climate change, because of overheating, and because climate overheating will lead to quite high temperatures indoors, and how people mitigate it. And I show a very small picture here where it also shows the gendered nature of thermal comfort and distress that can be created in these sort of houses, just because there is some lack of agency in controlling it. Lastly, we can use technologies like infrared imaging of building facades to understand difference between infiltration and exfiltration and thermal bridging, so that we can develop houses which are much more energy efficient. And that brings me up to a very a kind of closing the circle, saying that technology doesn't mean you throw a technology to a population who has never interacted with it, and if like expect that they are going to use that. But it kind of has to be intertwined within their community, within their lifestyles. And probably that's why we need much more living labs into these communities, to understand not only their behavior but also their culture, and we have to generate a more enabling situation for them people to uptake more energy efficient and climate efficient technologies and solutions. And I think I will end my presentation there, but however, if you have any questions, I'm happy to take in.
Thanks a lot, Ronita. No, this was very interesting. We'll move to the second speaker now. Mr. Peter, please share your insights on this particular thing.
Thank you and good afternoon. So again, my name is Peter Robel. I work for Knauf Insulation as Public Affairs Manager in the region of Eastern Europe. So I will be speaking about the climate smart solutions from the perspective of Eastern European countries. Most of them in our region, company region, are also members of the European Union, which sort of defines the framework of opportunities and also barriers. Now, if I want to speak about buildings that are resilient to climate change, we first need to somehow define what it means. And to me, it means, on one hand, some kind of structural resilience, and at the same time, certain autonomy of the building. And why is it? Because here in Eastern Europe, the climate change will be seen through long waves of drought and long waves of heat. And at the same time, we will see more extreme weather events that will result in disruption of supply of energies and water. So this is why I think climate change resilient building here in the region is a building that is quite autonomous, right? It's not depending on the supply of energies and supplies from a public network, but can withstand for a certain time without it. At the same time, we here in Eastern Europe, we are also, importing most of our energies, mainly the gas, from Russia and from other countries, and even regardless of that, I think we need to make the buildings resilient to price hikes. Electricity, gas, or water will become more and more expensive, and this will mostly hit the vulnerable communities. So buildings that will be resilient to climate change, I think, will be also resilient to the price hikes of utilities. So what does it mean, an autonomous building? In my view, it's a building that has the capacity to maintain certain thermal comfort without energy supply. It also can run on limited drinking water supplies and is also fire safe. That's something that we should not forget in a future setting of the climate change here in Eastern Europe. Now, this means a building that has some level of thermal insulation, good windows, but also some shading, and is connected to local renewable resources, but also has systems for water retention and water management, so that rainwater and grey water can be used instead of drinking water. Now, this is within the building, and I think we should not forget that the solutions go also beyond buildings. In cities and communities, we need to think about how we can decentralize energy supply and water supply, and how we can develop more, for instance, greenery in the cities to keep the climate, the microclimate, bearable. So this is the kind of idea, the kind of vision that we want to achieve. Now, how do we get there? It takes some change management. We all know it. I mean, we are represented three representatives of companies. We are constantly trying to change things in the companies, and we all speakers and the audience are trying to change societies. Now, the good message is that for this change, the technologies are available and affordable. There is no need to, I mean, we can always innovate, etc., but we don't need to discover those technologies or how we can make them affordable. They are available and affordable. Another good message is that resilient buildings, as I described them, are even at the same time they are more comfortable to live in and less expensive to run. So that's another good message. The bad message is that we need public policies to drive the change, so that building owners invest into renovation in a way that makes the buildings more resilient to climate change. And we need the public policies to drive this change. And we see governments across Eastern Europe trying and failing. And I very much appreciate the attempts, but I think it would be good if we can just start replicating the best practice and not learning from scratch everywhere. We have very good subsidy programs, for instance, in Czech Republic, that could be replicated all across Eastern Europe or in most countries of Eastern Europe, but we somehow don't do that. And it's a pity. Secondly, I think the governments need to focus on essentials. We should not focus on things like, and I don't want you to take this literally, but we should not focus on embedded carbon before we actually tackle the operational carbon of buildings. And also the third point I want to make is that we need to give the policies some time to start delivering. New policies don't deliver from day one. They need some time to test, tweak, and then after some time they start to deliver. So I think this is the kind of the challenge here in Eastern Europe for buildings to become climate resilient. That we need public policies and we need more dialogue, multi-stakeholder dialogue with the governments. We are trying to, as a company, contribute with our very little resources and capacities to establishing associations that speak to governments and that try to define what the public policies could look like. And I think the discussion about the Paris Agreement, following up on the Glasgow COP26, I think that's another opportunity that will be here around for the next year, and we can build upon it to somehow progress the policies in our region. Thank you.
We can't hear you.
Well, thank you. I basically ended, and I can't hear Jitendra, so that's.
Yeah, I think says something.
I can't hear Mark either.
Same here. Mark's screen seems to be frozen. I think there is some comment in the chat box.
So maybe while Jitendra and Mark are resolving the technical issues, maybe Andrew, I would suggest that you.
Yeah, so I can go ahead and go while Mark's resolving his technical issues. So, hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon. Andrew Baitek here. I'm the program lead for Net Zero Homes at Whirlpool Corporation. So I want to thank Renita and Peter for their insights so far. For myself, I stay mainly in the advanced development space. I know some of this discussion is about implementation, but most of my thinking kind of happens 5 to 10 years out. So hopefully that's still acceptable for the discussion. So to answer the question quickly, and I'll really dive in here, I think what I see a great opportunity for resilience within homes presented is to kind of change how we think about the home ecosystem. So changing it to think of, instead of just homes as places where we live, how do we create regenerative assets in our lives? Leveraging connections, whether virtual or physical, and that could be things like, home energy resource management, microgrids, et cetera. So again, some more background. One of my main projects at Whirlpool is a project called the Renew House that we have. It's a partnership with Purdue University. So this house is called the Retrofitted Net Zero Energy, Water, and Waste Home. And so what we did to this house is we took a home built in 1928. We actually made a bunch of changes to it to actually retrofit it and bring it into the future. A lot of this kind of net zero discussion is around new construction. And we said, well, housing inventory, I know for sure in the U.S., but I think broadly in the world is, housing inventory doesn't have a high turnover, and so really we need to bring existing buildings into the future to solve some of these climate issues. And so Renew is its own discussion, but at a high level, we are trying to retrofit it, get it to net zero energy, water, and waste, and we have a broad array of different technology implementations we did to achieve that. And I can get into the solar and the insulation and all that, but depending on where the questions go, but really what the key learning for that was it's easy enough to to change out your insulation, change out your windows, add newer high efficiency appliances. Of course, the Whirlpool plug has to be there. But what we started to learn is that to squeeze out that last bit, to actually get to net zero, and then even beyond that, you need to change how you're thinking about it. You can't get that ultra efficiency or even net positive by just thinking about individual products. We really have to start thinking from an ecosystem perspective. So I know Peter talked a little bit about, I think, microgrids and energy management. So starting to look at, as your home, you have a generation system. So if you add solar to it, but then also how you're using the energy, right? Because we're learning that, when you use energy is just as important, and in some cases more important than how much you're using. So if you have a battery system and some sort of energy management. Also in the house, we have rainwater collection. So you have a similar dynamic with water where, if in times of drought, it may be beneficial to have a storage of water within your home. And so you're actually resilient against, if the infrastructure is threatened by weather or other events, you have that buffer against it. So starting to think about the interplay between those systems and really buffering against what is the highest variability for the home is people living within it. And so just as in a further example, so I can kind of even play that out a bit more. So if you think back to February 2021, here in Texas in the US, there was a severe power outage that we had due to some severe weather events, right? And so what I can see from a Whirlpool perspective, we have access to some of our connected device data. And so you had natural gas pipes freezing. So there was a huge drop in supply in the system, but you still had a high demand for people who wanted to use heat and other devices. Looking at our data, I can see that while washing machine demand was down, you still had about half of the average load, people still wanting to wash their clothes. And so what they don't realize is that because this is all manual process, the Texas Oversight Board had set the price to $9,000 per megawatt hour. And so everyone who's doing laundry at this time is costing the system about $40 per laundry load. And this is incurring, in some cases, people are being assigned that price, but in other cases, it's just assigned to the system. And so if we have, just in terms of access to data, if we have systems where people can see, oh, this is what it's actually costing the system, or even if we have some automation in place to say, okay, if we can all reduce our load a little bit, then actually, we won't have to have these large outages elsewhere. And these are things that, it's very hard to manage for a person, but as we start to have connected device data and even renewables and storage, we could manage that more easily with home technology improvements in that area. And I can, Texas is one example. California also has some, in terms of loading lines with wildfires, but then they have a huge solar installation. And so their problem is a little different in terms of, hey, let's move this energy around, let's manage it so we can maximize the value of the solar, right? And it's entirely that time piece versus the volume of energy that's being used. And so it's these type of things that I think, you can create microgrids, you can create this self-generation, these buffer systems to become resilient against those times when infrastructure is threatened. So trying to look at notes here. So yeah, and broadly, that's it. I just leveraging that connectivity to make houses more flexible for us and the people that live within them. Right, changing that idea from individual products to how is the home performing as one unit, and so that's most of the changes and the opportunity that I see, creating assets for people.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. Mark, hope your audio is back now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you for inviting us. I think we're a proud partner of Habitat. Wienerberger is a building materials company working already a long time with Habitat. So really, we're very impressed with Habitat is doing in practice, and great and happy and proud that we can support you. I will give a little bit of a perspective how we look at sustainability and affordability. But I think because the bigger picture is sustainability, and it's also about affordability. And also give some practice examples. As Peter said, a lot of things are available. It's getting in the right perspective, especially towards affordable living. I will share my screen. That hopefully will work here. And can you see it? Can you see my screen?
Not yet, Mark.
Not yet. One moment. Yeah.
Okay, let me share your presentation from my side. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Would be appreciated.
Here you go.
Yeah. So this is maybe I take it from here. I think first of all we look at our approach to sustainability of buildings in general. I think you have to look at the whole, let's say, circularity of the building, starting from production to recycling it. You cannot just optimize one aspect. I think building materials is a huge amount of materials used and recycled. So we took approach here in our sustainability approach and also for affordable living for the whole chain. And I think clearly we are very much confronted with climate change, and we also part of our production process is also creating CO2. So for sure, all materials have to be the lowest CO2 footprint as possible. So I think for sure our company is investing serious amounts of money into to bringing that in the fastest level to a zero emissions level. So that is one thing. Secondly, it's also about sorry, if you can keep this slide on, just on the can you go one back? Yeah. So secondly, if you look at the lifetime, it's also important. So it's ideally you would have buildings which really last longer than 100 years. And that is also important for your whole CO2 footprint. Then I think if you look at the construction, it should be in a way and also local. I think also for affordable building, you need to have products, materials which are local and also can be produced ideally with people you involve in the building process. I think Habitat is really, done great things there because it's something you can be proud of if you can build your own house. And then you have the use and the maintenance is in fact the highest cost. So if you look at about affordable buildings, on the one hand side, it's the investment you have to do. But I think if you look at, especially now with energy, with climate effects, climate cost on that, there's a huge increase in the use phase and the maintenance phase due to climate change. And at the end, we look also at products, how we can deconstruct it ideally. I think already our roof systems are deconstructible, our facades are deconstructible. We're looking at our wall system to reuse it again. So that's the circle. And within that circle, next slide, please. You can see then the maintenance and let's say the use phase. And I think that given also the energy prices, I think energy efficiency, and Peter mentioned that already, is really key. So it's about energy phase. Energy efficiency is really top cost. And it's also about maintenance, durability. And if you look at durability, maybe there are some aspects we take it from a point of view from roofs and the load-bearing structures. I think it's things like it's not only insulation of heat, but also cold, but it's also the heat resistance of buildings. So it's you get the summers are getting hotter, or you get longer periods of very high temperatures, and you have colder periods. You have floodings, so your materials are confronted with floodings. You have seismic influences, so in certain areas, especially in Central East Europe, you're in the midst of a seismic active area. We already, unfortunately, had our things. So it's really about a lot of things are hitting the buildings more severely than the past. And maybe I can give you an example of a building, we did. Next slide, please. So one of the buildings we did is in fact an office building, but could also have been an apartment building. It's a building where we believe that the monolithic brick wall is a really good solution, where we made a wall really thick, meaning, and that's where it becomes interesting, if you have thicker walls with a combination of weight and insulation, because we believe this technology is really important. You need mass to have a construction which is seismically and constructively strong. The mass also helps you in solving, let's say, the heat in the summer. It can function and insulating blocks at the same time. And this building is in fact a very simple installation, simple building, a low-tech building we call it. Because I think one of the things also for affordable building is you don't want, sorry Andrew, but you don't want to have too much installations in it. The simpler the better. You don't want to have a lot of devices in. We believe that by using just mass and insulation, a combination with that is a really powerful way of creating, let's say, almost self-sufficient buildings. So that's, and I think that we all will love installations. I also love installations, but really that's our approach. So if you look at then the core of this technology is clearly roofs. Slide back. So the core is always the walls. Is about it's about insulating. It's insulating blocks. It's a combination of mass and insulation. Next slide, please. And it's also about water collection coming from the roof. So we also have solutions for, it was also mentioned by Andrew and Peter, it's about your water management. Your roof can collect the water, use it especially for your own house. So that's the system we're looking at, but also looking at it in a way to keep it simple, because we want to have packages. It should almost like be a Lego system that you can install it, maintain it as simple as possible, because that's just really key for affordable building and still having all these, quality, resilience qualities integrated into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So we also have our fifth speaker, Mr. Daniel. He was also facing few technology-related issues, but I'm glad that he's able to join. Mr. Daniel is a professor at the Department of Planning, KNUST University, Ghana. So, Mr. Daniel, we also just wanted to hear your insights for 5 minutes on some of the good examples and practices in climate resilient housing solutions, and also the existing lessons which can be applied while developing and scaling such solutions. Mr. Daniel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. And my apologies. The internet was not stable because of a rainstorm.
No
I just
problem.
want to begin my 5-minute presentation with a story. And this is a story that a colleague professor told me about 5 years ago. He had gone to the northern part of Ghana to visit his parents. He hadn't seen them for a very long time. So when he got there, he was really disappointed in the sense that he felt that the house in which they lived still belonged to the old tradition. And he wanted to show that as a son who had gone to the city, he was going to make their lives better. So what did my colleague do? He decided that he was going to give the family a gift of a new house. And the new house was made up of cement blocks and aluminum sheets. So within a short time, he did it, gave them the present, and came back to Kumasi, where our university is. 2 weeks after, he got a call from the parents, and he said, my parents said, please come and take your modern house away. We cannot sleep overnight. It's so hot, and our traditional houses were cooler. And so what I'm presenting to you is what I call the rammed earth houses, rammed earth houses. And it's interesting that Mark's presentation is a version, or my presentation appears to look like a version of what Mark spoke about. So these are rammed earth houses, which have a history in Ghana over 100, 200 years ago. We used to call them atakpame housing. And the whole idea is that the materials are very local, made up of laterite, silt, clay, and sand. And these are rammed together in the walls and used as the enclosure. What it does is that it provides thermal insulation, and because of the monolithic structure, it makes them more earthquake resistant. It saves on electricity bills, and it relies on local resources because the laterite, the silt, the clay is just around the environment. And it saves on transport cost of foreign materials. It blends with the environment. And most importantly, normally it's about 35% cheaper than the conventional housing. So in most parts of northern Ghana and the savanna areas of West Africa, this rammed earth construction appears to be the solution in terms of climate change and resilience. And I'm trying to see if I can share two images that represent what I want to show. I hope I'm able to do that. If I am not, I may just have to send it in attachment.
You can just send the link also in the chat box.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. But it's, for me, a solution to the urgent problem that we face in housing in the West African sub-region. To conclude, I would say that the government of Ghana, for example, presented a budget statement last week for 2022. And one of the key objectives of the budget was to provide opportunities for local people to use local materials and to build houses that will be resilient in the local context. So this is something that I wanted to share with you within the short time that I have. I'll provide the link to the buildings. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Daniel. No, and thanks to everybody for sharing these insights. We don't have much time for a panel discussion, but I just want to ask one question. I think one summary which I could take from this discussion, everybody has hinted that we do have solutions. There is often no need of reinventing the wheel. There are solutions available in the market which are probably affordable and which are also client-centric. But what we have seen is that, and I recently concluded a couple of studies in Indonesia and Sri Lanka, and I had a similar finding. There are solutions, but then the adoption rate is very low. And adoption will only happen if there is awareness around it, because awareness lead to behavior change. But what we noticed is that across all the income groups, and not just low income, the affordable, all the income groups, the awareness was very less. And we also see a similar trend in Eastern Europe, where we have a portfolio of our financial services. So I just want to ask from all of you, how do we raise the awareness of the communities, which would eventually lead to adoption of such solutions? And I understand it's a systemic that we need to do. The behavior change is at play. I think Ronita highlighted that we want to look at the social norms, but still just wanted to hear from your side, what can we do to really make this system level change? Please.
Who wants to go first? Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Sure, Peter. Yeah. Peter, we cannot hear you.
No. Oh, now it's okay.
How about now?
It's good. Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So I just wanted to share my opinion, and I think it is about awareness as much as it is about first-hand experience. I mean, if we want people to start building their shelters and their buildings, their houses, the way that is climate resilient, it's a change for them, right? So traditionally they build it one way. Now we want them to change the way they're building, and that's changing the tradition. I mean, we need to build a trust for the new solutions, and I think that's probably the role of governments to support at least pilot projects, so that people, the investors actually see and have a first-hand experience with a new type of building. That would be my kind of opinion.
Okay.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is unfortunately about technical norms, which you can only organize it on a governmental level. For instance, if you're in a seismic area, you need to have a certain minimum amount of building. And if I'm building a house, I would never consider seismic strength. I wouldn't even have a clue about it. So it's about bringing it down also again to simple design guidelines, not to make it complex again, to say, how do we solve seismic designs, minimum qualities, which make things happen. and then not via a tremendous complex technical committees who write in a report which I will never understand. Really bring it back to, okay, you want to have, these are your problems, this is how we advise you, and this is the guideline for people really in the field as local as possible to build it local. I think that will help and will provide the necessary safety also. It's about the safety of people, the health and the safety of people to enforce that by that way. But make it very friendly, very easy to use.
Thanks, Peter, Mark. Yeah. Ronita, please, I think
Yeah.
you are probably okay now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. I think well, I do resonate with what Peter and Mark said. Also, additionally, one thing I have seen over and over again, uh, certain solutions when they are put it as a pilot, they work perfectly. But when you scale it up, they fail to provide the same level of efficiency. And I have seen this over and over again in affordable housing, installing solar PVs in the roof. So when the first project happened, they could literally, it was net zero for most of their common spaces, so they were not paying anything. And when they scaled it up, it probably never reached the net zero, even to the extent it was probably 10%, 20% of saving. And that never so one is when we are doing technologies, I think this is where a very critical role that plays with what Mark pointed out. It's on the government level, on the policy level, as well as taking in the industry at the policy level and gaining that confidence. That would probably, because the industry is the right kind of a stakeholder who can scale up the technology, and but without the right support from the government, they will not be able to do that. So that's one I have over and over seen. So lovely solutions of technology doesn't work when you scale it up. Secondly, I realized most of the time vulnerable population, especially population at risk, they are more bothered about their lives rather than whether they feel they have normalized the risk from climate. And also because it is quite it is not very visible. So it is at one time you have to point out you cannot locate houses in most vulnerable zones, and that is purely from the planning perspective, purely from the government's perspective. Secondly, even if they are built there, I think the agency to operate within an affordable housing sector, any form of technology, do not lie with the stakeholders, the real people who are living there. So it's either lies with the management authority or the municipal corporation, and it takes a lot of time to trickle down to what they actually need. So if industry are taken into confidence by the government and say, you have this fantastic technology, go and talk to these people. Probably they don't want their fans to be operated by renewable, but probably they would like their common areas lit by renewable, or they don't want their food to be cooked by a solar cooker, but there is a school, primary school, which provides midday meals or lunches. They can use that. So it is, I think it is mapping of the need to the resource much more efficiently and effectively, which sometimes we take it for granted that, okay, this technology works in a housing, it will work everywhere. And it doesn't, because there I keep coming back to the social cultural norms. Food doesn't taste good when you cook in a different sort of in a non-conventional cooking fuel or a method, and it takes generations to come out of it. And overnight you can't just give them an improved cook stove, we have seen over and over again, and say that you have to operate it. But probably if we can kind of demonstrate very, very directly that if you use cook stove, but before using the improved cook stove, maybe you can, if we give you a soaking bowl to soak your beans before start cooking, probably you use less energy. Now that you're already using less energy, we want to try an ICS to use that. So these technologies exist. I have a very remarkable example. I should put that photograph here. There was this these houses were lacking amount of ventilation that is required for healthy life, just 3 exchange per hour. So we asked the architect, and the architect says that I provided a large window. It should work. And it does work when you just see the house in isolation and the window in isolation. Then we started taking up photographs of how people use their windows. First of all, the window was had a sliding shutter. That means 50% of the window is not openable. So you already cut off a part of your air exchange. Secondly, there is lack of space in these houses. These are large household sizes that are living in very small footprints. So storage windows are perfect spaces for storage. So half of the window is gone there. And then because people don't realize polluted air, but they realize smoke, and they know when they're cooking they need to drive the smoke away. Some of them who were relatively richer, I would say, installed extract fans. But because there was no provision of providing extract fans anywhere, they kind of blocked the whole window and created a small little hole, and then put the extract fan just for the extract fan to work. So now almost the whole of the large window which the architect said it worked doesn't work at all because it's not there anymore. So it is one is how technology has to marry with the local need. Secondly, when we looked at what is windowed, what is the meaning of a window or ventilated space to these people, we slowly found out they don't understand the meaning of ventilation, but they understand meaning of privacy. They understand meaning of their cooked food not being visible from outside. They understand that women would like to not being visible when they are cooking from outside. So you have to put windows at that particular level. So these are things which neither architectural guidelines ever suggest, or neither I think technology people are also not fed with these sort of problems. So the only solution I found is when a company or industry is making a technology, bring them to the ground. And only governmental I think projects can kind of, if they involve the industry to that and give them the confidence that yes, we have the confidence in you, you're going to build it I think industries is going to build it. It's not that they are not going to build it. There's no reluctance in the industry to do that. I think I should stop
Thanks,
here.
Tony.
Yeah.
No, thanks for highlighting, especially the people-centered design approach thing which you are recommending. We have 3 minutes left, and I want to give one Andrew and Dan also to just weigh in on this adoption debate.
Yeah, I can jump in. Just some quick thoughts on that. So from an adoption standpoint, especially with some of these resiliency improvements and technologies we're talking about for housing, a lot of the primary beneficiaries end up being, the generators or the holders of the infrastructure or the system at large. So I think for adoption, it's absolutely critical that you bring along individuals and homeowners in terms of the value that is gained from that. So especially when I was talking about the energy management type framework that could be used, right? There's significant value in that, but it's primarily given to energy generators and transmission owners, et cetera. And so I think adoption would really increase if you could create energy assets and give that value to the consumers. In the same way we have negative externalities for climate because of how we're using energy, we should have those externalities that are positive given back to the users in the system. So I'll be really brief, but I think it's critical we connect that value to the end user, and that will help adoption.
Thanks, Andrew. Mr. Dan, yeah, please share
Yeah,
your last thoughts.
just to tie in with the other speakers, I think the key word for me is co-production. Whatever you do, co-produce with those who are going to use it. You are a manufacturer, but there are users. So if there is co-production, then government can use policy to give direction, and then the end users will also be able to make an input, just like Ronito said. If you're an architect and you think that the window is only for ventilation, they will tell you, no, it's not for ventilation, it's for privacy. And so it needs to be closed so that people will not look into my food. So I think co-production for me is the key. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I personally learned a lot in this session. Thanks again for your time and sharing your insights. We recently embarked into a new pathway of integrating financial services with the climate resiliency. Eastern Europe definitely is one geography, where we have been able to do significant work. But when you try same work in other geographies, I think we are facing a similar challenges which you highlighted. And one conscious effort which we will try to do is to look at from the systems lens and increase the adoption. So for your participation. I look forward to connecting with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
That's it.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.